How many positions are going to be on the ballot for these 6?
Good questions. So there's 3 open positions, so you can actually vote for 1, 2, or 3 candidates. So you'll have an opportunity to do that. Okay? All right, we're going to get going, and I'm not going to take these, I'm going to just pull them in random order here because I got a bunch of them. By the way, these questions that were emailed, I shared with the candidates, so they've seen these questions before. Oh, thank you, Mayor. By the way, our Honorable Mayor Kilgore is with us tonight. Thank you, Mayor, for coming. This is great. He's going to keep me in line. This is great. Okay, so here we go with the introductions. I'll tell you what, we'll start at the end. Steve, why don't you go ahead and stand and just give us an introduction.
Hello, I'm Steve Smith.
We can hear you without.
Talk down the barrel.
Oh, right. First one right on the table.
Yeah. It went on, but it wasn't reserved.
I'll work on it.
My name's Steve Smith. I was very fortunate to grow up in a family with 2 parents that never dated anyone else before they got married. If you can believe that. They lived in the same town their entire lives. And I got the heck out of there as soon as I could. It was a town of about 5,000 people. Everybody knew everybody else's business. And I wanted to see the world a little bit more. So I left school, I left home to go to MIT in Boston, or Cambridge. And I ended up spending a couple stints there, getting degrees in mechanical engineering and textile technology. And the last one I got was a SCD, which stands for Doctor of Science, but a lot of people think it means social disease, so I didn't went to PhD. I was really lucky and married way above my position. Got a beautiful wife, and she was also at MIT, went as a music major and music and computer science, but not the combination of the 2. And after having gone to the Royal Canadian Conservatory in Toronto, and fortunately she chose MIT over Jillian, so otherwise I wouldn't have had it. But we ended up having 4 sons. We have 5 grandchildren now. 1 is in New Zealand, in Auckland, New Zealand, and the other 4 in California. We came to Lakeway almost 9 years ago in December of 2013. When we got here, we found it was a wonderful community. We were welcomed, as I'm sure all of you were. And I was so grateful for that after having lived in Illinois that I really decided I need to do something to help the community, so I started getting into politics. And that works. That better? Ooh. And I got into service group first, Lakeway Service League, and then got on the LCC board and LCF board. Then I was appointed to Zoning and Planning Commission for 2 years. And after that, while I was doing that, I was also the chair of the Charter Review Committee in 2017. I was fortunate to get elected to council in 2018, and even more fortunate to not have to run in 2020 because the 3 candidates who applied ran unopposed, and that was awesome. So we didn't have to mess up Lakeway with a bunch of signs like we have now. But I'm really glad to be in Texas, and I'm really glad to be in Lakeway. And that's probably enough.
All right, I'm Jennifer Samansky. My husband Tom and I have lived in Lakeway for 10 years. We moved here in 2012. We settled into Old Lakeway. We had no children at the time. We lived in Old Lakeway for 7 years and had 2 children while we were there. And in 2019, we ended up moving to Rough Hollow. We live just around the corner from here, actually. And so my background is in law enforcement. I have been in public service for 17 years. Initially, after college, I was with the Attorney General's office. And that was a 5-year experience where I was a criminal investigator, a licensed peace officer in the state, working a myriad of types of cases, and I might be able to get into that at some point in the future, but I investigated everything from public integrity to white-collar crimes to child abuse investigations, and after 5 years on that job, I decided to go into the real deal and join the Austin Police Department. And the first few years were outstanding and a lot of fun. But things started changing, and so my second passion has always been politics, and I was offered a job with the largest statewide law enforcement association, which is called CLEAT, the Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Texas. They offered me a job to come work legislative issues for law enforcement statewide. I spent some time in the Capitol right after college. My father was in politics, and so I've just been around it my entire life. And so it was a good way for me to stay in law enforcement, because that is my passion, but also help the current situation in the Capitol. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years. And it's really one of the things I do in my current job is I work with stakeholders. We represent 27,000 members across the state, and I'm tasked with engaging all of those members and their municipalities or counties, taking into consideration their issues and bringing it forward to the legislature, working with both sides of the aisle to enact good legislation, good government, and that's what I love. And I think that city government is the utmost important. It's where so many good things happen. It's where the best government happens, in my opinion, and from my experience up to this point. And so I'm really excited to be a candidate for Lakeway City Council to represent working families, represent people raising children in our community, and I think my time. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kelly Brentison. I am the big green and yellow sign that sticks out. If you are a Baylor fan, I went to Baylor. If you don't like Baylor, I did go to Baylor, actually. I was raised in a small town in Minnesota, actually. Like Steve, my parents never dated anyone else. Got married, and I was raised in an extremely small town, like I said. I graduated 65 people. I was raised in a farming family. And when I graduated, I never looked back, and I got the heck out of there. And I actually went to the #1 private Catholic school in Minnesota. I worked full-time all the way through, not even just 40 hours. I actually did 60 hours a week and still made the dean's list. I had that drive to really succeed. My husband and I actually are 15-year residents of Lakeway. He lived here back in the early 90s, into the mid-90s, and he always very much loved Austin. So when we wanted to move out of Minnesota, where we're originally from, Austin was #1. We looked all over western Travis County, and he saved Lakeway for last because that was where his heart was. And so coming down 620, before the Grove was built, I looked out and it was so beautiful. And coming from a small town, Lakeway had that small town feel. I still had the best of both worlds living in Minneapolis for 10 years. I had Austin, but I had that little country feel out here. It felt like home immediately. I didn't even tour my house, and I told my husband, I'm like, we're moving here. He's like, don't you want to look at the house? I'm like, sure, let's look at the house. So we actually put an offer in and never looked back. Since then, we got married actually in Lakeway. We had 2 children that were born at the local hospital. To say that we're invested in this community is an understatement, because we moved here for this to be our forever home. We chose, of all places that we could move to in the lower 48 states, we chose Lakeway. The reason why I want to run is I love this community. I want my children to eventually come back here. God willing, I have grandchildren, and they want to come here. My daughter is at Lakeway Elementary, and my son will start there in the fall. So I'm very invested in the community. My biggest thing, oh my goodness, I didn't even get started. Charities. I'm very, very much involved in charities. I'll get to that later. Unless you want to ask any question. Thanks.
I'm Nina Davis. I'm running for council. Still getting used to that. I was, a long time ago, I was born in South Carolina, raised in Virginia, and as the trend seems to be, I got the heck out of there. I went to Michigan. Undergrad, Michigan State, law school, University of Michigan. So football season is very good. Go green, go blue. After that, I went to Hawaii. I had to warm up from Michigan. So I was there for 20 years, warming up. Hawaii's gorgeous. I recommend vacationing there. It's very hard to live there. Very expensive, and you're so isolated. At first, that's really cool, and then it's just kind of a dirt. So eventually, it was time to return to the real world, and luckily for me, that was Lakeway. So I really love this town. It's quiet. It's safe. There's always something to do. It's Texas with hills and trees. Who knew? This is my chosen hometown. I've lived in many, many places. This is where I'm going to be forever. Professionally, I'll confess I did live in Dallas for 5 years practicing law. I hated it. Practicing law and Dallas. There's probably a connection there. Since then, though, I did a lot of mediation work and online dispute resolution. That suited me much better. Also managed a lot of businesses of different types, so I understand how that works and challenges there. Personally, I raised a daughter in Hawaii. Here in Lakeway, I renovated 3 homes. The gray hair came from the renovation, not the daughter. And she's turning 30 this year, and I keep thinking, okay, there's got to be like a typo or a math error somewhere, and I keep going over. She really is turning 30 this year. I don't know how that happened. I'm a policy wonk, and I had to look that up and decided it was not an insult when people were saying that to me, so I'm going with it. My idea of a good time is listening to Supreme Court oral arguments online, and then getting a cup of coffee and cinnamon roll and just plowing through a really big Zapco meeting packet here, prepared for the upcoming meeting. And I just really like that. So, might come in handy on council. I've been on the wildlife committee for a year now, and we've really expanded the website. Not just about deer, it's about all of our wildlife here in Lakeway. We're trying to make it a real resource for the residents when they have a question about snakes or raccoons or whatever. The city website, they just started. I publish a blog about all things Lakeway. So I'm heavily invested in this town. I'm going to be here forever, and I'm going to keep it as wonderful as it is now and make it just a smidge better with your help. Thank you.
Hi y'all, I'm Connie Ditto, and I live here in Rock Hollow as well. 5 years ago, my husband and I moved across the street to what I like to call the littlest house in Rock Hollow, a small little one-story house, and then August of 2020, we upsized and moved to West Rim, and we've been renovating that house ever since, even though it was pretty new. I grew up in the Midwest and went to nursing school at Purdue University after graduating first in my class from a small farming community as well. My father worked at the steel mill in Detroit and was drafted as a vet into Vietnam. Served his time there. That counted for his time to work 30 years in the steel mill, so he retired at 48. Bought a small farm in Indiana, and we moved there. I went to nursing school and had a summer internship up in Minnesota at the Mayo Clinic and met a boy from Big Spring, Texas. And as they say, the rest is history. He was also a nursing student there. We graduated, we moved to Dallas. I worked at Parkland in the ICU and ER for a couple of years. We got married, moved to Chicago so I could go to law school there. Did my first 2 years of law school at Loyola University Chicago. My husband got into medical school in Tennessee, so I finished up at the real UT. It's a year older than the UT here. Finished up law school there. My husband got into residency in Fort Worth, so we spent 5 years there. And lived across the street when he was just starting his fellowship. So I was a brand new first-time mom, 35 years old, living by myself with my husband coming back and forth from Dallas. So we knew we needed to be somewhere that was safe, somewhere that had good schools, and as everybody knows, this is just a gorgeous community. So we're here to stay as well. I've worked at all different kinds of firms, doing really all different kinds of law. And I was very blessed to find two wonderful ladies who I joined to practice actually in February. And that's one of the reasons that I'm able to run, is because I finally have the time and the support and the ability to do that. My husband opened up his own practice, and as any of you who are business owners know, the first few years are hard. I spent both of my first child, I got 2 weeks off with no pay between Christmas and New Year's, and went back to work from home until my baby was old enough to go to daycare. Second baby, I took him to my husband's office and answered the phone and got things going until he was 6 weeks old. So at any rate, he's doing very well now. We're very blessed, and I have time to put into our community. Like everybody else here, I volunteered to help make this wonderful community even better. We've lived all different places, and the people here are the nicest they've ever been. Ladies I didn't even know brought me food when I had my baby, when we moved and put our dogs down. Neighbors I didn't even know sent us flowers. We all lived through Snowmageddon. This community comes together. And the divisiveness that has started over the last few years, that's not Lakeway. That's not us. And I really hope we can find our common ground and just move forward.
So I know my voice carries a lot. Do I need this? Okay, good. So I came to Lakeway in 2013, but I started out life in Tucson, Arizona. I don't know if everybody's ever spent any time in Tucson, but I'm Louis Mastrangel. I was born in Tucson, Arizona, and I grew up there on about 30 acres. I don't know if you know about Tucson, Arizona, but Tucson, Arizona is basically the place where everybody that had a debilitating lung disease in the 30s and 40s used to go there because it was a dry heat. And so that's how the Italians of New York wound up in Tucson, Arizona. My dad was a developer. He bought about 40 acres at the end of town. I grew up with horses, which were great until I was about 15, and I realized that girls were way more fun, so I didn't ride horses anymore. But we had a pond, we had stables, we had a big, huge garden. It was a great life for a kid growing up in Tucson. And from there, I went to school in Arizona too. I never dreamed I would leave, but I don't know if any of you have been to Tucson, but my God, it is hot. But you know what? You know why the only people that don't leave are the people that don't realize it's not hot as hell everywhere else. So I got a chance to get a job with Motorola, and I moved to Orange County, California. And aside from the general politics out there, I really had a good time while I was young. I got married. I have a daughter. She's 35 now. I have my first granddaughter. She is going to turn 2 in May. And they visit me occasionally out here. Mostly I go to visit them. I've been in the telecommunications industry for probably 30 years. And I enjoy that very much. I was one of those guys that was one of the first ones to get a cell phone, because I got it for free. They were $4,000 back then. And I was the guy that would go up in front of somebody's house and go, "Hey, do you mind if I come over?" And then knock on the door. And they'd be like, "Oh." It was a fun trick to play back in the old days. But anyway, so from there I went into regular business telephone systems. Today I'm vice president of mid-market sales for a company called UJet.
which is a company that provides the services and the software for pissing you all off. So when you call into Spectrum and you get hanging around, Michael! Actually, we're a great company. We don't do that. So before that, when I first moved here, it was 2013. I moved over to an area called Maravilla. I really liked it there. I didn't want to buy there, so I looked at Steiner Ranch. There was a bunch of us that came out of the company, and we all decided to move from California out here. Although I'd been in Dallas for 7 years at one point, and El Paso actually for a couple of years before that. I loved it out here. So we all got the opportunity to buy it. Oh, really? Jeremy? All right, so anyway, I got here, I saw what it was like, I got to know some people, some awesome people like Dottie, and I loved the area. I didn't have to buy boats. Every idiot I knew bought one, so I didn't have to take care of it, so I got to ride on boats. I had, it's just been a great experience. The people here have been wonderful. The politics, in general terms, is exactly what I like, and I wouldn't move for anything.
Thank you, Candace, for that inspiring, wonderful background. We're going to start with a question that you haven't been sent, okay? I'm going to start with one that was sent in about 3 hours ago, but I don't think it's going to be too big of a problem. But because of that, I'm going to let whoever feels comfortable that you can start first. Okay, the question is this. What is your proposed solution to the traffic issues in Lakeway? Anyone want to take a bite at that? Go ahead, Liz.
So we have huge traffic issues in Lakeway. We have our internal problems with our arterials and our connector roads, but we also have the behemoth nightmare of 620 and 71. Even if Lakeway does nothing tomorrow, we come up with a mandate and say no more building in Lakeway, and we stop it somehow. We get sued like crazy, but something like that could happen. If we did that, everybody is building enormous developments around us. 620 is a nightmare. It's going to get worse no matter what any of us try to do here locally. We can influence some changes to that, but we can't control it. What we can control is what we're doing on the internal roads, like our connectors and our arterials. Flint Rock Road needs common measures. At some point, that road will probably need to be widened. We're going to be doing a transportation bill soon. What I really want to see is a way, so a lot of people weren't supportive of it, but I supported the square Lomans because I knew that was going to give us the road that we needed from Main Street, or from Lomans Crossing all the way to Main Street. These are the things we can control. We can influence TxDOT, but we can't control what they do. So my goal, the entire time I've been on council, is to try to come up with a way to give us a lot of things that we want, the kind of restaurants we want, supper clubs, Italian, Jewish delis, all the kinds of things that would make it so we never have to get up 620 to do that again. And that's what we're getting with a lot of the development that we did approve these last couple of years. There will be a lot of places to go, and you'll be able to go all the way to HED for this close.
Thank you, Liz. Is there anybody else who would like to listen? Jimmy?
Yes, so I agree with Lewis. 620 is the biggest problem. It's all of the complaints that we're receiving on all of our other roads. It all boils down to 620 because currently all the other roads are cut-through roads. No one wants to get on 620 and make their way to 71. So they use all of our other roads, and it creates all the other problems that we're facing. One of the things that I want to do, and I mentioned in my intro, is work with stakeholders. And I know that some of this is being done, but the chairman on the House side for Transportation Committee, I've met with him several times on other issues. We need to be engaging TxDOT, and it is not fully in our control, but we have to get together with BCAPE and the county and have a concerted effort to work with the stakeholders and with TxDOT to put pressure on them that we absolutely need this project. We also need it because we already have the PEZ, as Lewis calls it, we already have the PEZ placed in the middle of 620, which is designed to give notice, if you will, to residents that this is coming. There's going to be a barrier. So we have that in place. Meanwhile, businesses don't want to come to Lakeway because they have this easement, and that's not desirable. So we need to hurry up and get this project going. And I think it'll solve a lot of the other issues. Some of the other roads also are county and city roads, so we also need to engage the county on those particular roads. Again, just working with the other stakeholders to make things happen and put pressure where we need to.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Kelly,
It's no secret that traffic is growing in Lakeway, the development, just as Lewis said. We could say no more development, it's still gonna come. There's 1,100 homes, if you will, not homes or residences that are going right on the other side of Spring Hills and Flint Rock Road. I personally live off Flint Rock Road, and our lives have been changed and flipped upside down in the last 15 years. The amount of traffic, racing, careless driving, speeding, and accidents are growing every single day. We need to widen it. As selfishly as I want to say, no, don't widen it, because you build it, they come. Safety first. I don't want to get in an accident with my 2 small children trying to leave my community. So I have the number one thing, or the first thing I'll do if I'm elected to office into Lakeway, I'm going to put forth an agenda item, and that is going to be to resurrect the traffic committee. It was a committee that was in 2019. It was they met for a couple months. It was a one and done committee. No more. We need that committee to come back. We need to focus on our roads, but we also need to work with the city of BK. Our roads are so intertwined with them that our traffic and our residents are going inside of each of our roads every single day. I go to Whole Foods, cross BK, come back. I go on to county and BK and the city every single day. So that is one of the big things that I would personally want to see if I am elected to city council. I want to bring that back, that traffic committee, and I want to lead that. I want to be the city council liaison. I have a passion for it. It's my personal mission. I have 9 years before my 7-year-old daughter is unleashed onto these roads, and I want these roads safe. Thank you.
Okay, Patty, do you want to speak to that, please?
So I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I have 2 sons, they're 4 and 5, Thomas and Henry, okay, on my world. I also want to redirect the Transportation Strategies Committee. I think that what we need to do is be more collaborative and more cooperative across the board with our community. We need to, as everybody else said, work with TxDOT, the city, the county, engage our residents, engage experts. We need to look at our pedestrian traffic, our vehicular traffic, golf carts, bicycles. We need to figure out what we can do now to make things better until things that are not in our control come to play, okay? And so even in the 5 years I've lived here, things have changed a lot. Things are going to continue to change. Austin is growing, more businesses are coming, not just here, but to New Braunfels, and we're not going to stop growing. So we need to do things now with what we can, plan for the future, and really work together. That is something that you'll hear a lot from me over and over again, is collaboration and cooperation, and I want to engage the community and involve you not just as committee members, but open up all the meetings to in-person, as well as Zoom participation, as well as task force, work groups. We're having a transportation town hall. We need more transparency, more communication. People need to know that we work for every citizen of Lakeway, and that we're working with BK, the ETJ, the county, other cities, and everybody else. Spicewood, 71's going to widen, 620's going to widen, and we need to look at everything with a 30,000-foot view, as well as what we can do right now.
Thank you, Connie.
Just quickly, it's not just the square on Williams. That would only give us half of the Main Street we need. We also need the part of Main Street that's on Stratus Properties land. So we need to get them going. If Legend is going to start the road by November and have it done in a year, we need to make sure that Stratus is on the same schedule. Otherwise, half the road is not going to help. So there's that. My vision, even if that works out, we're gonna have 3 chunks of Main Street. We're gonna have the commercial corridor of the square on Lowlands, and then we're gonna have Stratus properties with apartments in that lovely park. I love the park. And then we're gonna have what we have now, which is HEB and the Oaks. And it's like camel with 3 humps. And I just don't see it, that's not how I envision a Main Street. If we really want a Main Street, we need to connect it. And the best connector that I can see would be have the developers put in a trolley system. It would really help get people to and from that park, for instance. And you could actually take the trolley from HEB on up to wherever above Stratus and Legend. So it's a thought, that the developers could do. If you distill transportation all the way down, it's sidewalks. Why doesn't Lakeway have sidewalks? Old Lakeway does not have sidewalks. I walk all the time. I see other people walking all the time, just dodging traffic. It's scary. We can't retrofit the whole town, but we could look at really at the streets where the people want sidewalks and where they could go in. Where they're really narrow, twisty streets that need the sidewalks, just put on one side. Anything you could do to help people actually walk safer would be a start. And that's kind of the transportation basics.
Thank you, Nana. Okay, Steve, I'm going to give you this question, and of course everybody else can answer it as well, but the question comes in, do you feel that a wildlife mitigation program should be started for the canyons in and around the Rough Hollow neighborhood?
You don't mean wildlife, right?
Wildfire.
Wildfire.
Oh, I say wildlife.
Yeah, we don't want to mitigate all wildfire.
Okay, just slap me when I do stuff. Again, this is my first time ever, so, I get a pie occasionally. All right. Tom's never been my big question. I really should say it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Wildfire.
in response to looking at that question, I went on the website, don't tell me about YouTube, and they have a statewide fire risk assessment, and that area in the canyon is rated high, and most of Lakeway is not. So the procedures, I understand, is you get a fire marshal in, and he assesses the risks, and then we develop a plan. We've been very successful creating shaded fire breaks along some properties in Lakeway, along the parks and the trails. Pretty tough terrain to work with over there. But I think you've got as much challenge here as there was in Lakeway. So we'll have to look at it carefully, get some estimates, and find a partner to work with us. But I think it's definitely worth doing.
All right, thank you.
So there's one thing that I want to do, which is I want Rough Hollow to become what's called a fire-wise community. And I was lucky that I already had researched this because I got a letter, as many of you may have, from your insurance company saying, are you a fire-wise community? Because if you are, you get a huge discount. So I was like, great, are we? And it turns out that we're not. However, I was talking with one of the employees of the developer who stated that there's someone in our community who has volunteered to potentially start this process. And it is a lengthy process. And it doesn't happen overnight. It involves removing a lot of brush. It's a pretty expensive plan, but it's definitely something we could do. The biggest challenge we have compared to other communities that are fire-wise communities is that we're way larger. So we have way more acreage than the other, if you can compare us to communities who are fire-wise communities. So that's the research I've done on it. I want to look into starting that, and I'm going to identify who that individual was that volunteered to help, because I think it would take quite a bit of volunteer to save taxpayer dollars and do it as fiscally responsible as we could, and we would all get discounts if you live in Rough Hollow on your insurance.
Okay,
So we have a wildfire mitigation program in place. In 2019, we budgeted for it. We've already cleared Hamilton Greenbelt 1. If I had a map, I could tell you what I'm talking about. But we also cleared Hamilton Greenbelt 2, and we're about to start on North Lakeway Village. That's the next one in the list. Then what we're gonna do is go back as council and review all of the different areas that popped up. Somebody had asked a similar question about whether or not we would go into the Canyonland. Yes, we will go into the Canyonland, but today, a huge chunk of it is in the ETJ. So you can't spend city tax dollars on the ETJ. A lot of it is under HOA control and the developer's control. And then there is one small area that is under the city's control today. That area has no residential in it. So all of the areas in Lakeway that are at risk, we've already planned all of this out. And what we, as it takes a couple of years to go through it, we're going to get together again. We're going to look at what is still available, what we still need to work on, and we're going to take that and plan around that. So we'll probably have 3 more areas to clear. But if you live anywhere near Hamilton Greenbelt 1 or 2, or just generally Hamilton Greenbelt at this point, you're covered.
Thank you. Kelly, go ahead if you like.
For you Rough Hollow residents, I empathize with you. Some of our best friends lived in Steiner Ranch during the 2011 fire that went through. I was on the phone with them as they were trying to get out, and there's fires right on the other side, and they were stuck in traffic and couldn't get out of that one road. So for Rough Hollow, luckily you have a couple exits. Like Lewis said, a lot of that is with outside of the actual city limits. But I think there's a partnership that needs to be made here. There's a lot of entities, there's a lot of stakeholders that go into that. We need to work together collaboratively to make sure that we take those risks out, because we don't need what happened to Steiner Ranch to happen to Rough Hollow and areas around. I also live right on the outside of the city, living off Flint Rock Road. I have canyons around me. I have a lot of area that could come up and turn into a fire and get to my house as well very easily. So I understand you guys from Rough Hollow, and I think we need to do something about it.
Okay, Nana.
Just a couple quick things. I believe we have a grant writer on city staff now, and there's a lot of grant money out there for this kind of thing. So I'm sure she's looking, she or he, would be looking to find some funding that way through grants. But I would definitely be in favor of even going to the capital reserve for this kind of thing, because fires is something we don't want to have happen anywhere in Lakeway. So the area needs to look at it. If there's a severe risk, we need to take care of it. As far as being fire-wise around your home, we can. There's information on the city website. You can just call and get a free fire-wise assessment for your home, for your yard. I did it. It was really eye-opening. One thing that everybody does that you really shouldn't do is just put a little wooden mulch all over that's a fire hazard. So as long as that's in your yard, the whole thing will go up. So keep that in mind next time you have it.
Okay, we're going to move on. Except we're going to let Connie talk. Go ahead.
I'll go really fast. Absolutely. Anything we can do to prevent wildfires, we need to do. Lakeway's doing what they can. We need to work with ETJ. For those of you that don't know, it's the extraterritorial jurisdiction. They're basically orphans. So they haven't been annexed into any of the cities. And so those are actually some of the most critical areas because they aren't funded like we are. And they don't have folks who are paying a lot of attention to them. But if there's a fire that occurs there, it can certainly come over here. So again, we need to work collaboratively and cooperatively with all of our neighbors. We need to do what we can. We're in one of the worst droughts that we've ever had, and the drought line just keeps moving and moving. And so we need to try to get on top of this as much as we can.
Thank you, Connie. All right, we'll start with this one with Nina. And the question is, do you support the installation of license plate readers by homeowners association on private or public roads? Why or why not?
Okay. If it's a private road, you can do whatever you want. But if it's a public road, then you would be installing them in the right of way. And HOA doesn't have the authority to do that. So So you have to get the city to agree to that. And we certainly want to work with the police department to make sure that they're good with it. One thing, when this came up a year or so ago, you have to realize that if you have this kind of mechanism out there, if you're collecting this kind of information, first of all, it goes to the company who manufactures the mechanism. They own that data and they sell it all over. So it's not just your HOA who has the data. The company who makes the mechanism has the data and they make money off of it. Also, it's going to generate a lot of Freedom of Information Act requests. So you basically hire somebody to handle that, because once word gets out that you're collecting this information, a lot of people don't want it. So there's a lot of things to think about. First of all is, do you have the right to collect this information? Do you have access to the right of way, or how are you going to do it? And then how are you going to manage the data once you get it? How are you going to keep it safe? How are you going to keep it secure? And do you really want that on a public road? It's like everybody in Lakeway would have to know about it and agree to it and agree to public funding of it. Tax dollars would be paying for it. And that's something that would have to, I think, go out to a vote.
Okay, Steve, same question for you. Do you support the installation of license plate readers by homeowners associations on private or public roads? Why or why not?
Well, homeowners associations can do it within their development, and I don't see a problem as long as the homeowners agree to it. I can see both sides of this. It would be very helpful, especially during the construction that's going on, if we knew who was going in the middle of the night and stealing construction materials from the homes that are being built. It would be nice to know who came into your subdivision that really wasn't living there, and when a crime was committed, what time your stolen car was driven out of the subdivision, that type of thing would be very valuable. But I am nervous about the privacy aspects of it. But you all realize that we're all being tracked 24/7 with our cell phones. It's not like they don't know where we go. They may not know what car we drive, and they'll be very disappointed when they see mine. But maybe that's why I keep getting these calls for car warranties and stuff. So I'm hoping they'll give me one for myself, that my warranties expired, they're going to take over. But I see both sides. I think we need to have much more information on where the data goes. But I see it as a very valuable tool for crime fighting. And we'll have to take it down the road another step.
Okay, I'll open it. Kelly, would you like to answer that?
I actually sat through that city council meeting. I've been to every city council meeting in person for over a year, especially when it went in person. So I sat through that when it came to light. Like Steve, I can see both sides of it. I like the fact that if my child was unfortunately abducted, we might be able to track them down quicker and faster, right? But also with that, it is such an overreach of government. I know we're already being tracked by our cell phones, but it's such an overreach of government. Where does our privacies as a United States citizen come into play here? And for me, I don't want them. It's a complete government overreach in my opinion. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll start off by saying that no matter what, I would always listen to the citizens of Lakeway, the members of the HOA, and hear the opinion and what the consensus is. However, I definitely have a strong personal opinion about this because I've worked in law enforcement. I worked in the Fusion Center for 5 years. I have accessed this data before. I have personally been involved in homicides, robberies, investigations that were solved solely based on license plate recognition data. And let me also say, no matter what we do here in Lakeway, our license plates are being scanned constantly everywhere you go. They're fixed in Austin, that's even the city of Austin. They're fixed on I-35. They're also fixed on tow trucks. So when you pass a tow truck, they're constantly scanning license plates and that information. Now also, the license plate data, it's not real data, it's not actionable until a police officer takes that information and runs it through a system that they have to be vetted to run it through. So it takes an image of the what we call a 28 in law enforcement. It takes an image of that, and you'll probably get a color of the car, and you won't get the make or model. I wish you could, but you won't. You'll get the color of the car and just the digits. And law enforcement then is tasked with finding out who that is actually registered to. And again, you have to have a criminal nexus. This is all highly vetted individuals who have to have a criminal nexus before they can't just start running plates willy-nilly and do, it's a misconception. But again, if I'm elected to council, I will always listen to what the majority of my constituents are saying, not just in Rough Hollow, but the entire community, and go with that. But I do have experience with those, and I know that they have solved not just major crimes, but even property crimes, and people are very grateful for that. And so that's my opinion on it. But again, always listen to what the residents of Lakeway think.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right. Okay, real quickly, and we'll go on.
How many are at the city council?
So, there's going to be 3 open spots you can vote for. How many are 6 plus the mayor. Okay? So, for those of us that live in Rough Hollow, there was something kind of similar up at the roundabout last year that was taken down. And so we got this question in advance, and when I first got it, I thought, well, that kind of came a little bit out of left field. But actually, the city of BK just enacted some license plate scanners, and their communications department puts out a little video they call a buzz, and they put out a buzz and said that they recently installed one of these at some of their city parks, and they've already solved 2 crimes with it. So I do understand that there are definitely some privacy issues and some concerns, but this is one of those issues where I would defer strongly to law enforcement and to actual privacy officials and authorities to figure out if this is something that's going to help our citizens, and if that's something that our citizens want, then I'll support it.
Thank you. All right, Connie, I'm going to go with you again on this question. We've all experienced in the past 2 years mandates placed upon us by government entities. Do you feel that these mandates were justified even though they violated individual rights as afforded by the Constitution? Now, I realize as I asked that, the person that wrote this, that's their opinion, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean, but that's how they ask it. So I'm presenting it to you as asked, but basically they're asking if you feel that the 2 years of mandates were justified looking back, I suppose. Okay, Connie.
So, sure. I mentioned to y'all that I'm a registered nurse. My husband's a former registered nurse. He's a surgeon. He wears a mask 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. My sisters are both nurse practitioners. And so I come at this from a lawyer perspective and also from a public health perspective. And I think looking back, we can all see that there were a lot of misunderstandings, missteps, overreaches. Those of us living, especially in Texas, had a much different experience than people living in different states, even different counties. Our kids got to go to school, with masks optional, where some kids didn't get to go to school or had to wear masks, sometimes even outside. So I think sure when we're looking back, we can always say, you know what, we could have done better. And next time, hopefully we will do better. I think we've learned a lot from the last 2 years. I don't think we'll ever shut down our economy again. I don't think we'll ever shut down our schools again. I think masks are always going to remain optional. The Supreme Court's already come down, and vaccines are going to remain optional. So to the extent that this is directed at COVID, I think we've learned our lessons, and we're going to move forward. And that's really all I say about that.
Thank you. Steve, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I think there was massive overreach at the federal level to the state level, from the state level to the county level, and down to the cities. We've seen a trend in this where more and more of the decision making of municipalities and cities is being taken over by dictates from state or from the federal government. And I, for one, hate it. That's one of the reasons I moved to Texas was I thought we were going to be free down here. And, you know, you're okay, I'm okay. Don't get in my face, we'll have a nice time together. But that's going away.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Kelly.
Oops, I never shut this off. Good thing I didn't clap on.
You can leave the mics on, by the way. It's fine not to, you don't have to turn them on and off, just leave them on.
I'm very much for personal choice, for freedom. I believe in the United States Constitution and the Constitution of Texas. I think we need to follow that, number one. I'm luckily, we need to follow the law. The law's on our side. Freedom matters. My daughter has a rare disease, and so this is a very personal thing for me. Mask mandates in schools last year destroyed her health. Spent thousands and thousands of dollars to help heal everything that I did for so long to reverse. And having her in school with mandatory masks sickened her. She went back to 40% sick. Have you ever had a child with 106 fever? 107? Try that for 1 week of every month. That increased to 1 week and then 2 weeks of healthy, 1 week of fever. So when your child is lifeless with a high fever, you can do nothing about it, and it's because of the masks that force that on her, you will look at things a little bit different. So again, I will stand by the United States Constitution and this Constitution of Texas, and that is on our side. And I'll stand always as a parent with a child of a rare disease that needed that mask optional. I could have given it to her. I could have went for an exemption, but I didn't, because for the first time in her life, she wanted to try to be normal. She doesn't feel normal. She's been poked, she's been prodded, she's seen specialists all around Texas. And she said, Mommy, I will wear a mask and be sick because I want to try to fit in and feel normal. So I will never support a mask mandate. I think it was a complete government overreach, and it went against our constitutional rights.
Okay, thank you. Rhonda, did you have anything to say?
Well, all these mandates were, of course, just federal and state level. This is not a local decision. It's not something the council really had anything to do with. My personal opinion is that in a public health crisis, I would hope our government would take some steps to protect us. In hindsight, of course, that's just not what happened. It was poorly done, poorly executed, poorly thought out. It was a mess. I do hope that lessons have been learned. And I think as COVID, I agree that we're not gonna see that happen again. But if something else comes down the line, there could be a different result. So it is something that I think we have to guard against. We have to remember what happened and just make sure it doesn't happen again. And we take care of ourselves.
All right, Lewis.
I don't think I have a lot of new to add here. I pretty much agree with what everybody said. I will remember, though, that when it first happened, remember what was going on, right? We're starting to get these reports on TV. People are dropping dead like flies. They're coming back from China and they're half dead on the airplane. Respirators, everybody's out. All these people are dying in these nursing homes. So I would give about 2 months of, yeah, let's be careful. But then I was on council at the time, and this county mandate came in, and they said, you city, you have to follow our mandate. And by then we were already realizing some of the facts were coming out. Children were not getting this. There was a whole lot of information that it was taking forever to get past us. But once it came to, so I don't know if you know this now, but the city grants emergency powers to the mayor. And the mayor has to decide whether or not, I personally wish we would have been the rebels.
Yes.
And said, no. We already know that there's a whole lot of bad information out there, and we should have stopped. We should have been that rebel city. But unfortunately, only one person on council had that decision-making power. And I will tell you that a lot of us fought it. But we didn't have to.
Thank you, Lewis. Anyone else? Or we're going to go on? Okay, Jennifer?
It wasn't you.
So.
Yes, it wasn't our current mayor, by the way.
I mean, I'm all for individual liberties. That's really my only answer to this question. 100%, we should all have the choice to do what we want to do. If we get the information that we were getting and we believe that that's extremely scary, which it was, and we want to stay home in quarantine and we want to wear a mask or 3 masks everywhere we go, then by all means. But if that's not what you want to do, then you're weighing your own risks. And that's my thought on that. I mean, with the schools, I agree with Kelly. We're lucky that in Travis County, yes, they did the mask mandate, which was not ideal. However, our children actually got to go to school, which was one thing that a lot of people didn't get to do. So, I mean, a little bit of kudos to the school board that they didn't go with SCOT's recommendation. I liked that they actually made their own decision. That was great. Would I have done the mask mandate? I would have been against that. So, yeah, that's short answer.
All right, the next question, because I'm losing a little track on who's done what, I'm going to start right here with Lewis. We're going to go right down the line. Okay. It's kind of similar too, but not. During COVID-19, many people were forced to work within their homes, and some businesses were transferred from a workplace environment to a home business, etc. What is the limit or criteria that you would place on someone operating out of their home in the future now that COVID is over and normalcy across our community has returned to pre-COVID business operation?
So, the fact is, COVID exacerbated the amount of people that are working from home now. But this was already happening. People were already moving and working from home. The criteria today is there are 19 items and criteria for a home-based business. And anyone who technically gets shipments at home for, I know my friend Jennifer wanted to start a business making sachets, and she wanted to get the stuff delivered at her house, and by that, and she could make them in the kitchen and sell them over eBay or on Etsy. Can't do it. Cannot do that with our ordinances today. I do not want to suddenly see people working on cars and having garages or doing all that kind of crazy stuff. But I do understand that people like me, I work from home. I am managing multiple salespeople around the country, and I'm doing that from home. If I get a computer or supplies delivered to my house, I can New York. So I think that the way we should look at that is we need to realize that the world is changing. 75% of our major organizations are now in a hybrid model where some people work from home, some don't. That's only going to grow. COVID exacerbated it, but that was a trend that was already continuing. We have to make sure that people are allowed to do that. Secondly, what I would like to see, I mean, why did we want an ordinance like that in the first place? Because you don't want to drive by and see a business being run out of somebody's house. You don't want to see pallets sitting stacked up in front. You don't want to see parts. You don't want to see trailers and all that. So we need to make sure things like that don't happen. But at the same time, the lady that is wanting to do piano lessons for kids after school, that person's breaking the law today. That's ridiculous. As long as they're not creating a situation for their neighbors where they can't enjoy the rights of their own home, then I don't have a problem with it. Toys and noise, I'm sorry. Any family with 5 or 6 kids is going to have toys and noise in the yard. So we just need to make sure that we keep what we want, which is we don't want it to look like there's businesses in our neighborhoods, but we also want people to have freedom to be able to work from home as long as they don't interfere with other people's lives.
Thank you, Lewis. Okay, Karen?
So this is actually a discussion at last week's APCO meeting where they went through the current ordinance and went through the first reading. It wasn't officially a first reading, but it was more of a discussion on how they could amend the current ordinance to allow basically reasonable activities to be conducted from their home. It's hard to write laws. I mean, I wouldn't have a job as a lawyer if people couldn't look at a law and interpret it 6 different ways. I've done litigation. So it's a very hard task, and especially in instances like this when it deals with folks' livelihood and their homes, it's extra difficult. And so where I think the city's going with this and where the city attorney recommended was basically that reasonableness standard. So, maybe so many trips back and forth, maybe you can have 2 piano students but not 25, or maybe you can have, one person learning the drums but not 10 at the same time, and so that kind of thing. If this is something that you're very interested in, it's coming up in future ZAPCO meetings. ZAPCO is going to go through the first reading of the proposed amendments, and then it'll go to council, so you'll have a couple of opportunities to comment on that and to participate in that. And I would encourage you to keep abreast of that on the city's website. They post the agendas, they post the minutes. You can email all the council members. The names of the committee members are there. Usually the chair has an email that's available. And so it's something that, goes from MLMs to piano lessons to the daycare, which is kind of what brought this to light.
All right, thank you, John. All right, Dinah, what do you got?
Well, I was at the ZAPCO meeting too, and I thought the commissioners did a really good job for our first reading. The law now just basically says no to everything. That's easy. If you just say no, that's it. But what they're trying to do is to allow the freedom to have some business use at home, but not, to the point that it hurts your neighbor's property value or enjoyment and so forth. So, one thing that I suggested, when I got up to speak, was that they look at the number of employees, because they were talking about we want to allow 1 employee to come and work at the home, maybe 2, and I said, well, maybe just don't allow any employees. I mean, if you want to run your business from home, that's one thing, but if you need employees to run your business at home, maybe that's the point where you say, okay, that's the red line, that kind of business needs to be run in a commercial setting, not from home. So that's one thing they might consider. Primarily, just want to make sure the business use is incidental, and it is a residence. It's a residential neighborhood. It needs to be a residence primarily, and business use would just be kind of on the side kind of thing. And then we're talking also about, well, you don't want to have, if customers are coming, you don't want them to be parking on the street. So it would be off-street parking required for customers, things like that. So there's lots of little things that you can do to still allow a business to be run. Most businesses, not all, but most businesses could be run to some extent from home without impacting the neighborhood. That's the goal.
Okay, Kelly, you're up.
I too was at that ZAPCO meeting. I'm a juxtapose of a person. I've commuted to a company on the East Coast for 14 years, so I work from home. The one difference though is I'm not selling anything. So I do have deliveries, but I'm not selling anything. I'm not a salesperson. But while I sat in that audience, I found a loophole. I'm an abstract artist. I paint. I'm not currently painting. I'm only doing my paintings to charities right now, so I'm not technically running a business. But I could buy a property in Old Lakeway. Now keep in mind, homeowners associations, HOAs, POAs would never allow a home business. Most of them don't here in Lakeway. So the main people who are affected by this is Old Lakeway. Rough Hollow won't allow it. I know where I live, I have an HOA, they don't allow it. Right, but I could buy a house with the sole purpose of running a business out of it. So I could open up a gallery, have a paint studio in the back, and take in appointments. I have a friend who makes custom rugs. She could buy the house next door to her, next door to my gallery. She could run a business out of it. And then the next person, who's a jewelry designer, could buy the next house. We could have a whole arts district in a residential community within a couple of years. And if you're living in a residential neighborhood, that's what you moved to. You didn't move to a condo in the domain where you have residents above and business in the bottom. So although I do agree that we need to relax things a little bit, if I'm painting and I don't have clients coming to my house, I should be able to sell out of my garage, right? The piano teacher, the people who's doing tutoring, the CPA that sees clients from time to time. As long as the business is contained within the house and it's not affecting others, I think that's okay. But again, it needs to be loosened a little bit, but we can't have a full arts district within a couple of years. And we surely don't want a Rainy Street, for those of you who know what Rainy Street is. Thanks.
Okay, Jennifer.
So I do think that we need to expand the ordinance But we actually had a situation in Rough Hollow during the pandemic where one of my neighbors wanted to open a school, and it was being blasted all over the social media everywhere. I'm opening a school, a Christian school at my house. I need teachers. I'm a former teacher, is what she was saying. We're gonna do this grade, do this grade, do this grade, and we're gonna take care of these kids. And everyone on our street, some of them are here, was like, no, that's not okay, because we're all home too, and all of our children are playing outside. I mean, this was in the middle of the pandemic, and so the traffic that it would have caused, I mean, it can't be disruptive, and it can't be forward-facing. Those are kind of the two things to me. I do like Nina's idea about the employees. I think that actually could potentially work, but I think the most important thing is that we're thoughtful in the process, and it's not something that can happen overnight, so we, multiple readings and making sure that whatever changes we make in the ordinance don't have any unintended consequences, because unfortunately that happens quite often. You change the ordinance and then whoops, some scenario happens that we didn't anticipate. So this is something we really have to think through before we make the changes.
Thank you. All right, Steve?
Okay, for me, it's no employees, no customers visiting the site to be sold goods on premises. To me, that's a business. It becomes a business if you have employees, customers are coming, and you're selling goods. Now, the services side of it gets a little tricky. And that's going to be a thorny one for us. Is it, do we want to prohibit piano teachers? Do we want to prohibit math tutors? Do we want to prohibit massage therapists, real therapists? I think we have to think about that. But in terms of commerce, of selling goods from your home, with customers coming to your home to buy those goods, I think we have to draw a line there.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna stop with the questions that were emailed to me, because I've got 12 questions now from the audience, so I'm gonna start on those, and the candidates have not heard those. Also, I forgot to mention earlier, a lot of candidates have brought signage and other handouts in the back there, so before you leave, don't forget to pick one up. I see a lot of people are already taking off. That's unfortunate, but I understand you have other things, that's fine. It's an open forum, and I hope you can stay as long as you can. We'll extend it a little bit beyond 9, so well, you're gonna love this question, but it should be pretty easy to answer. What is the definition of an American? And this time, Steve, we're gonna start with you, and work the other way down. What is the definition of an American?
I believe the 13th Amendment, or 15th Amendment says, under the jurisdiction of the United States. So that was put in to prevent diplomats, kids from being Americans. But I think most people should go through. They're born here, that's fine. I don't like people flying in to give birth to a baby from an anchor baby. I think that's a cheating system. I think we have too strict an immigration because we need more citizens. We need more good citizens. And excuse me. But to be an American is a privilege. Some of us are blessed with birth here. Some people, like my wife, went through 5 years of waiting to get in, and I am very upset for the people who try to play fair and then end up not getting in, and they've been on the list. We tried to hire several Indian engineers, and the boundaries are fantastic. You have to prove that there's no one in the United States that can provide that same service, and you have to prove that you're going to do more than anybody else. So it's a little crazy, but let's go through the system we've had. There's also a lot of Americans in South America that they call themselves Americans too, but we're talking about U.S.
We're talking about, U.S. Americans. Okay. Jennifer.
So I believe in the process that we have in place and that everyone should go through that process. Obviously, that's not being done, so we have a crisis at the border. Luckily, my job in the Capitol has been focused on law enforcement because it's a lot more fun and exciting than the border issues, which are critical. I realize that they're critical, but they're also very complex, and I don't have the solution. But I do have a really good friend of mine who worked patrol with me in East Austin. She grew up in East Austin. She was not a citizen. Her mother was not a citizen. Her brother was not a citizen, and they all worked their butts off to become citizens. Never did anything illegal. And when we were in our third year of patrol together, her mom finally got her citizenship, and I went to the party, and it really taught me a lot about. She explained the process, how long it took her to actually get that citizenship, and what all she did to get that. And that's where we need to be. There is a way to do it. But again, I'm not going to stand here and say I have all the answers of how to fix the border crisis. But I do believe that we need to have a system in place that is reasonable so that it can be attained. And I think that's maybe where we're falling short. The process isn't reasonable, potentially. We might need to fix that. So hopefully
Okay. Kelly, what is the definition of an American?
In my mind, it's the God-given inalienable rights granted to a group of individuals. Not everyone is blessed with that. Those of us who were born here are lucky enough to have that. I think it's something that is quite a privilege, and we're lucky, like I said. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, due to time, we're going to switch questions. Nina, do you think all voters should present an ID card to identify themselves as authorized to vote in our elections? And make it a yes or no answer, please. Well, that's one question, says yes or no answers, please. Do you think all voters should present an ID card to identify themselves as authorized to vote in our elections?
Yes. It needs to be reasonable. My question is, why in Texas don't they allow college IDs? College universities, they have photo IDs. They're not on the list as allowed. I don't understand that. Do we not want 18 or 19, 20-year-olds to vote? I don't understand. That should be allowed. And you need to use the ID to validate voting. Yes, that's good. It shouldn't be used to trip people up who are entitled to vote, but maybe they didn't get the right number put on their mail-in voting application, which happens in the primary election. So they need to fix that so that it's fair. But yes, I don't have any problem with an ID for voting as long as it makes sense and it's used to validate, not to trip people up.
Okay, Connie, the same question to you. Do you need me to repeat?
Yes, I think it's reasonable to have to present an ID to prove who you are before you can vote.
Okay, and Lewis.
Three-letter word. Yes. It's absolutely ridiculous that you wouldn't have to identify who you are to make decisions for the United States.
All right, we're going to start in the middle this time, and we'll start with Kelly. All right, Kelly, what limitations / city ordinance, if any, should be placed on future? What limitations or city ordinance, if any, should be placed on future golf cart or similar vehicle use in Lakeway?
I actually sat through the meeting when this was introduced. Again, I attend the meeting, so I have deep knowledge on a lot of issues. So I sat through that meeting. When it was first brought to council, there was no decision made on it. I think a big thing with that is that we should allow it. That when the state of Texas changed their laws, so should have the city of Lakeway, right? We should be following the state law. There are some things that we have to do with that, right? Number one, I don't think 10-year-olds should be joyriding, especially at 9 o'clock down busy roads. So a couple things that I do support about that. I think, number one, you should be a licensed driver. Number two, it needs to be registered with the city. You need to be able to identify who that golf cart is. The golf cart itself, I live in a golf community. The golf cart has to be road eligible. It's got to have the indicators. It's got to have proper lights. It's got to have everything from the mirrors so that you're able to see just like a car. These are main things that you should have to do. Registration and fees that would be paid into the city, that helps pave our roads. The cars are paying a fee to be on a road, so should the golf carts. No more laps. For those of you who have a golf cart, I hope you're not driving around with a baby. I see it all the time, and it's absolutely crazy on your lap. Should have seatbelts. I mean, and the other main point to this is that it has to be on certain roads. Nobody wants to see a golf cart flopping down 620 Flint Rock Road where there's not even there's zero, actually, shoulder. So main road or off Flint, it's gotta be something on a little bit quieter of a street. But as a big thing when it comes to transportation, getting cars off of the road, golf carts on, if there's a proper path, and it's within parameters.
Okay, anybody else like to? Okay, Louis?
Okay, the state has laws about this already. If we go with the state laws, that means every cart has to be licensed, every cart has to have certain equipment. You cannot drive on streets that are over 35 miles per hour. I want people that live on a neighborhood street to be able to visit their friends. I don't want to see golf carts on our connectors and our arterials. Please, I know a lot of people are want to see this, but try to imagine everybody pushing the envelope at 30 miles an hour on Lakeway Drive, and a golf cart, which is only 2 lanes, going 20 miles an hour in front of me. If you're going 29 miles an hour, you wind up with a car pile up behind you like crazy because nobody wants to go. I get it's a leisure community, but we need to be responsible about it. We've already asked that all the new developments, they're going to have sidewalks, so it's going to be easier. All of the new business developments, retail, we've made sure that they all have that. I'm happy with the idea of creating shared use paths for that, but we cannot allow them, and as Kelly said, we cannot have children driving them around. And I would say about 20% of the time, that's who's driving them. And that needs to stop.
All right, thank you. Connie?
I didn't drive my golf cart here tonight because I knew that was going to be a question. But I support golf cart use. I live here in Rock Hollow, and in order to go to my friend's house, I have to hop on Highland Boulevard sometimes. My 4-year-old rides in my lap when we go from my house down to the marina. I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think that what we probably need to do is lower the speed limit from 40 to 30 in our neighborhoods, if that's what we need to do, but I think we need to let people get around on their golf carts.
All right, thank you. Steve, we're going to send this question to you from the floor. How will workforce housing be enforced to maintain the resident work in the Lakeway area? And the follow-on, is it legal? So, how will workforce housing be enforced to maintain the residents' work in the Lakeway area, and is that legal?
Okay, I guess the question is if someone builds a workforce housing development, can we force them to only give the affordable housing to Lakeway residents? The answer to that is no, unless it's a privately funded share apartment building. You can rent within a wide range to whoever. You can't exclude people, but you can let people in. I personally, the workforce housing is a very troubling thing. We're seeing it here. It's not unique to Lakeway. There's a fireman who works here, who lives here, who works in San Jose Fire Department. He commutes back and forth because there's nobody in San Jose that can afford to live anywhere close to that town. I think that this issue is only going to be saved by letting the market do its thing. We might have to pay $2 more for a hamburger in Lakewood. I think that's the reality of it. If we want services here, we're going to have to pay for it. And I don't think making inexpensive housing in our single-family charter community is really what we want to do.
Okay. Anybody else ask that question? Jennifer, would you like to answer the question, or do you want to pass?
I mean, I'm more than happy to answer, but I think I've said quite a bit on this topic. Can you repeat the actual question?
Yes, how will workforce housing be enforced to maintain the residents' work in Lakeway area, and is it legal?
I mean, I don't really understand the question, but I think if I interpret it the way that Steve did, it would be that we can't enforce it. So we can't, the way that the project that was just denied was presented to us, in order for them to get their government tax funded dollars for building this project, they are not allowed to ask the resident where they work. So we're left with, we have no clue who would be renting these apartments, where they would be working, what their occupation necessarily was, even though they said they would give us that. We never did find out what these people are doing, because that's a really good question. In these other projects they have, what is the occupations that we're bringing in? Because we would want to make sure that we're actually housing the people that we're trying to house. So none of it makes sense. We can't regulate it.
I just wanted to add, for those of you that didn't get to watch the mayor's Facebook Live tonight, or this morning, this afternoon, sorry, it's 2 o'clock. There's another proposed housing development at Big Creek in 71. This time it's being proposed to the state, and there's information on the city's website about how you can comment about that.
All right, Nina, if I can read this, if I butcher this question, my apologies. If you have not been on council, and you haven't, so this will apply, tell us what you've done for or with the city of Lakeway prior to filing to run for office. And then if other people answer, if you've been on as a current council member, tell us what you individually accomplished during your tenure. Okay, so Nina, take it away. What will you do?
What have I done? Well, I've been going to council meetings and ZAPCO meetings and all sorts of committee meetings for years now. I'd say 4, 5, 6 years. I kind of enjoy it. I love doing it. I go through the meeting packets beforehand. I post online, on Facebook and Nextdoor, trying to let other people know maybe they don't have the time to do it, so I kind of put highlights out there, get some discussion going. So I do that. I do post a blog talking about all things about Lakeway. It includes the updates on what's going on in city government. I've been on the Wildlife Advisory Committee for a year now, like I mentioned earlier, trying to get the word out about deer and all of the wildlife that we have. So I've been doing all that. And people kept telling me I should run for council, and I finally took them seriously. So.
Thank you. All right, Kelly. Same question. If you've not been on council, tell us what you've done or with the city of Lakeway prior to filing to run for office.
Well, you guys already know that I'm an abstract artist, so of course I'm on the arts committee. Thank you to the mayor who put me on. That's a huge passion of mine. And so arts committee, we were the ones who put on the lovely orchestra symphony with awesome orchestra. That was us. So I've attended every Lakeway City Council meeting for over a year. I also sit in on ZAPCO meetings. The other things that I've done is that giving back is a huge thing to me. I am luckily enough, my father, who is now passed away, he taught me how to paint. But one of the core things that he also taught me is how to give back selflessly. So I would donate a ton of art to Mac Jack McConaughey, the Blast Foundation, which is founded here in Lakeway. Same with Ashley's Angels, 1231, CC4C, and then multiple other charities throughout the throughout Austin. I've raised over $130,000. Just this week, talk about selflessly, instead of running my campaign, I was painting a painting, started on Monday, sent it to the photographer, produced all of the stuff that'll go with it, and it'll be auctioned off at Matthew McConaughey's charity next week. So again, servant's heart here. Thank you to my dad for 2 things: teaching me how to paint because it's my lasting connections with him, and I know that he's painting with me as he's in heaven. And number two is giving me that passion to give back.
Okay, thank you. So I have 4 questions for someone in the audience that the question is, all 4 of them are tense. When I say that, I don't know. In other words, I'm gonna read one, but I'm gonna tell you guys, you don't have to answer this question. Okay, we'll just throw it out. If you don't feel comfortable answering this question, just don't raise your hand. The question is, Mayor, I apologize. How do you feel about someone renting the city manager an apartment in Lakeway, yet actually living in Spicewood so she can get around the fact that she's supposed to live in Lakeway? Anybody? Oh, okay, Connie?
If that's true, it would be a violation of the city ordinance.
Okay. Well, someone like that answer. Let's see.
I'll speak,
Okay,
I'll
Brian.
speak in favor of that. When we negotiated the contract to hire a new city manager, we took a lot of factors into account. We interviewed many candidates, and we looked at the pay scale and the amenities offered in surrounding cities. And we looked at the quality of the person we wanted. And we came to a conclusion that we wanted Julie to be the city manager. And we put together a package that helped her live separately from her husband. And I'd really like to have a hard discussion with whoever's saying she's not living in Lakeway, because she does spend at least 5 days a week in that. Maybe she goes and visits her husband on the weekend or a special occasion, but she's there. And whoever's hiring private detectives to make sure she's there should knock it off.
It's now 9:05, so I've got one more question, but it's not to any of these 6 people. It's actually to our mayor. And I'm going to let him finish up if he would like to speak to anybody here. But I would just like right now to thank all 6 of our city council people for their time and participating. And the only reason I'm asking you this is because I feel like you're the one that knows. Does anyone know when the Rough Hollow bond will be paid in full?
Okay, first, a big hand, because this takes a lot of work to do right. And if you've never organized or done anything in politics, it's awful hard to get it together, and it's really hard to do it in a uniform and fair fashion, because a lot of people would like to put a question in to skewer one candidate at the expense of another. You didn't see that. At the Rough Hollow meeting a year ago, there was sort of a question out of the audience that was sort of off, and it hurt. So that didn't happen, so congratulations, okay? You should also be very proud, because you have 6 people who have volunteered to give of their time and effort to serve the city. They're stepping forward either to do it for the first time or for re-election. You have no idea how much work goes into this, how many hours it takes to be prepared, and if you've never sat on this side of the questioning, I will tell you that it is somewhat daunting the first time you do it or the second time you do it. So for most of these folks, it's the second time they've done it this cycle. They all did a great job. I think you should give them a big hand for the old Teddy Roosevelt comment about, the person in the arena is the one that these are the folks in the arena, not the people in the cheap seats who are trying to score points at somebody's point. So in terms of your Rough Hollow bonds and your mud bonds and your debt, it's going to be a long time. You have a beautiful subdivision of the city of Lakeway. So it's the city of Lakeway, and it's the Rough Hollow subdivision. At one point, we had an employee at the pool who was charging Rough Hollow residents the non-city, the non-resident rate to swim because they lived in Rough Hollow, they didn't live in Lakeway. So we eventually got that young man to understand that Rough Hollow was part of Lakeway and that they should pay the same rate as everybody else. But you have extraordinarily difficult infrastructure that was built as a part of the development. And you have 3 muds. And each of those muds will eventually, the city will become your water purveyor at some point as we continue to annex. So one of the questions that was earlier on was about the fire mitigation. And right now, as you know, the fire mitigation is the responsibility of your homeowners association because we don't own that dirt. It's not my dirt yet. Now, it will become my dirt, and it will become part of what we do, but it's not my dirt today, and it won't be my dirt for several years. It also means it's not my debt, it's not our debt. So when we eventually annex certain pieces of property, and sometimes it's small areas, there's an area of El Mud where there's only 4, El Mud 11, I think there's only 4.5 acres of their control unit, what we call their service area, that is outside the city limits of Lakeway. Once that comes in, we have to bring that bond and its debt structure and put it inside the city's debt structure, which may require us to then refinance portions of it. But your water debt, once we even bring you into the city, cannot become a part of the city's municipal debt. Your water debt has to be paid solely by your customers. So until we decide to either amortize that quicker, or refinance it, or bring it forward, or add new. So I don't know. If I were king, and this had already occurred, the city of Lakeway would be in the water business, and we would be pushing water to the west. And by pushing water to the west, we would have added new customers, which would have alleviated your throughput and then helped you take care of those bonds quicker. But right now, your Elmuds have all drawn a line in the sand, and much like everything else in the world, they shall not pass. But the secret to getting this done quicker is you have to come into the city has to expand with you, the city has to push with you. I mean, if we're going to put new middle schools on Bee Creek Road or a new elementary school, I don't really think we want to have yet another school on septic.
Right.
So I can't tell. I'm a separate municipal. We represent a separate municipal body than the MUDs. But if those MUDs work for me, we have a different answer. So that's where we are. But
Well, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. Appreciate you giving your time to sit. And he mentioned that, all these people sitting up here are willing to sacrifice their lives a little bit and work around their jobs to do something wonderful to make our city of Lakeway wonderful. And the mayor does the same thing. We appreciate your work. Thank you, sir. Okay, this is going to conclude. I'll start the music back up. There's food over here. Please help me eat it. And we'll see you next time. Okay?
I just wanted to say real quickly, and the mayor actually brought it up, that Rough